Today is the 23rd of February, 2016, and we're discussing the Democratic and Republican primaries in both South Carolina and Nevada. And my guest is Dave Dewitt, a local journalist for the Athens News, and I am Robert Whaley, retired historian from Ohio University, and this is called the Athens Speakout number 355. So I'm going to make a statement on the results of the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire primary, which we spoke about last time. As of the 15th of February in 2016, which was a long week in the South Carolinian election that we have just gone through. Anyway, in the Democratic caucus and in the Democratic primary, Vermont Senator Sanders won over Hillary Clinton in the counting of votes. But the Republican race is rather unclear, because all of the pundits were interested in advancing propaganda for about 22 Republican candidates. There were far too many candidates in the race. And television, Fox and television, CNN, CBS, and NBC were trying to give more publicity to all of the many Republicans who were vying for a very competitive race on the Republican side. Anyway, I was just able to report the results when the Nevada report came in, so we have to handle two states here today. So the historians call television industry the fourth estate. The idea of the fourth estate came back in 1789 when the French monarchy was overthrown by a democratic revolution. And the French monarchy had three estates. The first estate was the clergy. They had three houses in Parliament. The first estate was the clergy. The second estate was the nobility. And there were only a few people in those two estates. And the third estate had 95% of the people. And they constituted the vast majority of the rising middle class in France. And the French had already experienced the American Democratic Revolution. So they decided to make the three estates into a national constituent assembly, which means they're going to write a constitution. So the Democratic and Republican parties in the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire primary, the voters have a choice to choose between two regular parties. And that's why those two states give the voters more time to give their maximum input. The rest of the 48 states are in a stampede. We're going to have Super Tuesday, and they're going to run 7-11 states all at once. And you don't have time to survey all of the voters, and the media have a tremendous amount of influence in the rest of the primary states, and they're all rushing down to get delegates to the nomination committee. Anyway, it was clear that in both Iowa and New Hampshire, Hillary Clinton and Sanders were close, but Sanders was ahead in the popular vote, although in delegates, they were pretty close. Anyway, Hillary had the advantage of a established Democratic Party. Now, inside the Republican Party, we had 22 candidates originally, and Iowa and New Hampshire weeded them down to 6 viable candidates. Do you want to go over those candidates that started out in South Carolina?
On the Republican side, we had remaining, I don't know if I can do them in order, but we had Donald Trump.
Number 1.
Ted Cruz.
All right, who is Donald Trump? Give us a little biography.
Donald Trump is a real estate mogul and reality television star from New York City.
Good, you got it. And who was second at the polls in that time?
Tail gunner, Texas Ted Cruz.
Right. He was a senator.
Yes, a U.S. senator.
Right.
And then following him is another U.S. senator, Marco Rubio of Florida.
That's right.
And following him, now who would have been late?
Fourth was
in the
Jeb
polls.
Bush.
Jeb Bush was
he
in
was
the
still
polls.
in the race.
He was, and this is, we'll get to that.
Yeah, how he got out.
Yeah. And then fifth would have been Kasich or Carson. Kasich in the polls or Carson?
No, Kasich was ahead.
Okay.
And Carson
Governor
was number
John
6. Right. And they each got about 7%.
Neurosurgeon Ben Carson.
Yeah, and they're still in the race.
Yeah.
But
well, and Kasich, even before the primaries, he was downplaying it. He didn't even go to South Carolina
right.
for the day of the primary.
Right. Okay. Well, that gives us the picture when the primary opened on Monday, the 15th of... Okay, so how did Bush get out?
Well, the key thing for Bush was South Carolina loved his brother, George W. Bush.
Yeah.
And they were big for him. So if he was going to come into this race in any significant way, he was going to have to hold his ground in South Carolina, and he just did not do that. He got beat pretty bad by Rubio, Carson,
Well, he first got
Trump.
ruined by the pundits.
Well, sure.
How did the pundits get him?
Well, I mean, the pundits. What are you referring to? Something specific, or just the fact that they were diminishing
let's talk about Rachel Maddow.
Oh, from MSNBC.
Yeah. On the 19th of February, before the votes were even counted, she said that George W. Bush is the hidden problem. They don't want to discuss what happened in Iraq, Afghanistan, and so forth and so on. And that was the trouble with the whole Republican Party. And they weren't even talking about reality.
No. And Jeb trotted his brother out there in that last week.
So at 5 a.m. on the 19th, Rachel Maddow said, the only thing that's left are fumes for the Bush campaign because all of his financial backers, all of the pundits quit.
Yeah. And, that was death to him because he was largely, he was very well financed. But once you lose the backers, then there's not much you can do. And his
brother went there to give him support, but they didn't want to talk about the brother.
No,
what happened in Afghanistan? Where are the weapons?
I think that was a desperation move. He was just trying to reignite whatever love South Carolina Republicans had for George W. Bush, and it backfired, actually. It did the total opposite.
Okay. So anyway, the results are, as of the 20th of February, at the end of the week. How did they stand then?
After the primary, what happened there?
In South Carolina.
Well, Trump won significantly. He won with 33%
of
the vote, which was 10 or 11 points higher than the next guy, Cruz.
That's right, and he got 200,041 votes.
Yeah, it was significant.
Yeah, and Rubio
came in just a shade shyer than Cruz at like 20. They were both in the 22s. But I think Cruz was just a little bit higher, like
half a bit higher. Well, no, I think you're confusing Rubio and Cruz.
Oh, Rubio was a little bit higher.
Yeah. Right. Trump was way ahead, and Rubio and Cruz were close.
Yeah, both at 22.5, 22.6.
Rubio got 22.6, and Ted Cruz got 22.5. And Rubio got 165,000 votes. And Cruz got 161,000.
So
And those two
4,000
guys
vote
are
difference.
fighting it out for the remainder of the primary.
Oh yeah, it's those three. I mean, those three are the candidates, and you've got Rubio, who's the establishment will mostly line up behind him at this point, and then you've got Cruz and Trump, who have their own contingents for their own reasons.
Right. And Kasich had 7.6%, and Carson had 7.2%. And there's been a boom now for Kasich
Yeah,
because he comes from Ohio,
Yeah,
and he thinks he's going to really be a competitive candidate in Ohio. That comes in Super Tuesday.
in Ohio. On that, Ohio's is March 15th.
March 15th. That's
Yeah.
coming up.
Yeah.
I think Carson will have to, well, no, Carson doesn't have to bow out because he's going to go there with his delegates and bargain at the convention.
Oh, you think he'll drag it all the way out to
He
them?
may resign tomorrow, but he could.
There's going to be a lot of power politics going on.
Yeah.
And he's going to dangle whatever delegates he has until somebody offers him something.
Might as well at this point.
Oh, that's how it works, yeah.
Okay, so why did Trump, what were the major issues of Donald Trump which fooled the pundits? Why did he do so well in South Carolina?
Why did he do well?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. One thing that I know fooled the pundits is a lot of people were skeptical about his criticisms of the Iraq and Afghanistan war and George W. Bush's tenure in the debate right before the primary. He was critical in a way that we haven't seen Republicans be for a long time, and so they thought that was going to doom him in a way, and it didn't. It didn't
No.
at all.
No.
People responded to him. And beyond that, he continued to hit.
Well, everybody knows that the war in Iraq was lost.
Yeah. Well, that should be common knowledge by now. And there is a lot of buyer's remorse. But for, a good decade there, it was an article of faith in the Republican Party that George W. Bush kept us safe.
Yeah.
And that these wars, you couldn't criticize
Right.
the wars at all. Donald Trump came out and said, no, he didn't keep us safe.
That's right.
And he came out and said these wars were a mistake.
Okay.
And that's
So
new.
Donald Trump, way back in Cleveland, when you first got in there, raised three issues: China trade and Mexican drug smuggling. And he was going to take care of both. And then he had a third issue, which was called political correctness, in which he blasted the media and blasted the pundits in both parties, and he blasted the establishment of both parties. And political correctness is a new term for what George Orwell called propaganda. And I brought out Orwell's great novels, Animal Farm and Animal Farm and 1984, and his essays are not well read in the United States. And so far, I haven't heard George Orwell cited by any American politician in either party, and they don't even confess that television is in the propaganda business. That's the dirty secret. But I know it,
It's that.
and a few historians know it.
Sure.
Robert, I wonder whether or not, George Orwell used to be required reading in English in high school literature.
But you read it and didn't understand it.
What do you mean I didn't understand?
Did you understand it in high school?
I think we probably did.
Well,
It
you
was
told me you didn't
propaganda.
understand it.
What's that?
You didn't understand it. What does Animal Farm say? Tell me about Animal Farm.
Well, I'm not gonna, we don't have time for me to explain what Animal Farm is, and I think if you read it, you know what it stands for. You don't have to be asking me.
I'm saying that
I'm
the
saying-
American public...
No, I agree with you there.
Okay, fine.
Because if you mentioned the book 1984, or if you mentioned Animal Farm, they don't know what you're talking about. Matter of fact, they never heard of George Orwell or Eric Blair.
That's right.
Eric Blair, yeah.
Yeah.
I know that it was required reading for me in high school, at least Animal Farm was. I hope it's required reading now because it's extremely important, the lesson that it teaches. And getting back to what I think you're referring to here is that I think it's a common misconception, and we touched on this last time, it's a common misconception that Animal Farm was a critique of communism or socialism.
That's
it was
right.
a critique of Stalinism.
Correct.
Very specifically Stalinism.
That's right.
George Orwell himself was what we would call now a democratic socialist.
That's correct.
So it was Stalinism and totalitarianism that he
Right.
was really critiquing.
And
And that is a key lesson for all American high school students. I hope that they still assign it.
Well, I think the teacher, helped explain it in the end
Yeah.
after we'd read it, what we'd read, if we didn't pick up on it. So,
Sure.
But whether or not they would do that today, you draw your own conclusions,
Right.
Well, I'm waiting
And
for
the Cold War's over, so there's that
I'm waiting.
final
I'm
minute.
waiting for Bernie Sanders to cite George Orwell.
There you go. I'm sure he could.
bet he's read it.
I'm sure he's read it, and I would like to hear his thoughts on
Anyway,
Stalinism
we're
versus
getting back to Trump
Trotskyism
now.
versus-
Trump was very impolite toward women, and he came across as
He's a
barbarian.
misogynist. He's a chauvinist.
Yeah, he's a chauvinist. And he said, I don't need the women's vote to let them stay in the housewife.
Yeah,
And these young pundits don't know what they're talking about.
it's repugnant.
So
It's
he's not going to get
repugnant
many
way of
women's vote.
thinking.
He's
No.
not going to get my
Well, he
wife's
doesn't
vote.
deserve them.
Nevertheless, he's up in the polls. And then he also stuck his foot in his mouth when he says, what are you going to do about terrorism? And here is his answer, I will do whatever it takes.
Yeah, he said that
Well,
he
it's a
would go-
cliche. What does that mean?
it's very vague, and that's part of my big problem with him is that his answers are very little substance. They contain no specifics.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, as far as I could tell, what he said was that he would go way beyond waterboarding. So he would violate unknown
That's what he
measures
promised.
of the Human Rights Act, and he
The
would,
question is,
he basically promised to globally violate the Human Rights Act with
right,
a
but-
callous, cavalier attitude
right. But
toward
it
any of the
gets, it
standards.
gets
that-
the working class vote because what...
I won't do that, but that's political. I consider that political cowardice. He's
From your
pandering.
point of view.
Well,
But you're
yeah.
an informed journalist.
I know, and I know that it works with the people he's targeting.
Yeah.
I'm just calling him a coward for doing so.
Well, he's not a coward. He's a calculator. He wants to win.
Yeah, well, I consider it cowardly to not be honest. I consider it cowardly to be manipulative.
Okay. If you're saying that Joe McCarthy was dishonest, I could say that Trump is dishonest.
I
but
think they
you-
both are,
But
or
you
were.
see, George Bush has a polite dishonesty.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "Oh, there are weapons of mass destruction there," and he has the State Department, he has the CIA saying, "Yeah, they're there," and he has all authorities saying, "Yes, there are weapons of mass destruction there," and it turns out, after searching for 6 months, they don't find them, and then
Yeah.
he's embarrassed. That's the problem.
Well, again, we get back to propaganda.
Getting back to propaganda, and he's got a crude surface, but what Trump knows and what the pundits forget is 74% of the voters only have a high school diploma.
Oh, no.
So when he says, I'm
Of
going to take
course.
care of China, yes, yeah, go take care of China. I'm losing my
It's a
job.
very callow way of going about things. He's appealing to the basest parts of people's intellect and the worst in their nature. And I'm not saying it's not effective. It is effective. It's just, from my point of view, and I'm sure from your point of view, it's repugnant.
Yeah, okay. Well, I thought that Trump was better than George W. Bush for this reason. I don't want a monarchy. I don't want King Bush III.
Oh, Jeb Bush. Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't like the political dynasty.
Yeah, I don't want the dynasty. So
Yeah.
I would vote for, if there were only two candidates in the race, I would vote for Trump. Because he is an outsider.
He is an outsider. I don't know if I could. I understand what you mean about dynasty.
George W. Bush is polite. No question about that.
Jeb.
Yeah, Jeb. Yeah. Both Bushes are polite.
Yeah. I think both would be. I think both would be.
Bush, the grandfather, they're all polite.
Sure. I don't know. That's a hard question.
Well, we don't have to decide that. That's been the South Carolinians have decided that.
They have.
Yeah, that's right. Now, one more tiff that Bush made was the last day of the primary on Saturday. Pope Paul Francis went to the Mexican border.
Yes.
And said, Trump is not a real Christian.
Right.
Well, Trump had a reply. Yes. Who are you to define Christianity?
He's Christ's vicar on earth, according to the Roman Catholic Church.
But I'm a Presbyterian, and I am campaigning for the sovereignty of the United States, and we have the right, as Americans, to define the borders. And every state in Europe is sovereign, and they check their borders, and the Vatican itself is not allowing all these refugees in.
Yes.
So that was quite a propaganda.
I usually enjoy Papa Francesco. I like what he has to say about a lot of things. But
he went over the line.
On this one, no, I just don't think, like, from a political standpoint, it wasn't very savvy.
Right.
I don't think it's ever savvy to go around pointing at people and telling them what their beliefs are, whether they're Christian or not.
Right.
I think and it never reads well from a third-party perspective.
Right.
If Donald Trump says he's a Christian, I believe him. He must believe in Christ. That's fine.
Right.
If that's what he says he believes, I'll take him at his word.
Right.
I don't think he's very Christian-like in a lot of his behavior, but if he says he's a Christian, then I'll take it.
So what's behind the Trump rise?
In general?
Is this so-called war on terrorism. And I'd like to make a statement on the need for the American Congress to define what is terrorism. Where did terrorism begin as a subject of fear? Terrorism was not invented by the Muslims.
No. The Reign of Terror? Are we going back there?
That's right. The French Republic, 1792 to 1799. Robespierre and 12 other men, or 11 other men. There were 12 men who set up the Committee of Public Safety. And this was called the Reign of Terror.
Right.
And they had the guillotine. You see, the problem was that when the revolutionaries executed Louis XIV in 1792, they had no chief executive. So you had the National Constituent Assembly, the National Legislative Assembly, the National Assembly, and there was a situation of chaos there. So in order to enforce the legislative will, they had the Reign of Terror to build up an army and stop inflation.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason for the terror. And anyway, so the Reign of Terror lasted from 1792 to 1799. And in 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte, who was a general in the Revolutionary Army, won a military victory. And then he decided to change the Constitution.
Yeah. Well, he was a power seeker.
Yeah, he became the emperor. He became the emperor.
And he took over. He saw his opportunity.
And so you have revolution and counter-revolution. Okay. So anyway, we had another reign of terror in the Russian Revolution, 1917.
Absolutely.
Nicholas II was overthrown.
and assassinated along with his entire family.
First thing the communists did was to set up a secret police. And it was called the Cheka, and then it was called the OGPU, and then it was called the NKVD, and then it was called the KGB. And Stalin, like Robespierre, had a fear of Trotsky, just as Robespierre had a fear of Danton. And he said, if I don't execute him, they're going to execute me.
Oh, yeah. After Lenin passed, yeah.
That's the theme of 1984.
Yeah, that's a fascinating story. I suggest anybody look into that history, the fight between Stalin and Trotsky, and the subsequent battles between their followers. Trotskyists didn't stop existing just because Trotsky was dead.
Well, that's true. Because he could accuse the other Bolsheviks.
They didn't have any power. Trotsky didn't have any power. He was in exile when he was assassinated.
Right. But he had the fear. Stalin had the fear.
But there are other strains of,
you see,
Ruth Goldberg, I'm thinking.
Well, see, Trotsky was a better historian than
Stalin was a strong man.
A bureaucrat.
Yeah, he was a strong man. He was a brutal force.
So Trotsky was very popular in 1917 as the creator of the Red Army.
Yeah, Trotsky was more cerebral.
He knew his name. And then he wrote a history of the Russian Revolution following the pattern of the French Revolution. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, Stalin has become a state capitalist. Right. Which becomes Napoleon in the novel.
and as such, that was a threat to Stalin.
So anyway, Stalin died a natural death on the 5th of March, 1953. And he stops the reign of terror when he puts in Lev Beria, a fellow Georgian, as his secret police chief. And all of the rest of the Politburo were completely silenced by the later Joseph Stalin. Now, there are rumors that the Politburo may have shot Stalin, but that'll never be proven yet. That's never come out.
Right.
The official story is that Stalin died of a heart failure.
Yeah.
But in any case, the rest of the Politburo did get rid of Beria within a year.
Oh yeah.
And he was blamed for Stalinism. And then, of course, a third reign of terror was Mao Zedong.
Yes.
Took over China.
In China.
1966 to 69, you had the so-called Cultural Revolution, in which Mao becomes...
Killed millions and millions, 20 million?
Yeah, became a new authority figure. And then he died in 1976 in bed. So my idea is that the U.S. government, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party need to pass some legislation defining what is a terrorist act and how does a terrorist act differ from ordinary political crimes. What makes San Bernardino, was that a murder or was that a terrorist act? That's the debate right now.
Yeah.
And it's
do you have any opinion on what those parameters should be or how you would define it yourself? Or do you just think that it's something that should be up for discussion?
Well, if I were writing the law, I would say terrorism is a action with either political or religious or ideological motives of a collective body. It has to be more than 4 or 5 people, okay, who have a organized group. The Hezbollah or the Hamas, the Ku Klux Klan are obviously terrorist organizations. You got to have an organization. It has to be a collective body who will murder their enemies on the basis of religion, race, or political ideology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now,
I agree with that.
Now, McVeigh was an individual nut.
He was not. He did not have the collective body or organization.
Well, he thought he did.
Yeah.
He thought he had the Idaho militia.
It was a politically motivated crime.
Well, it was religious motivated. Well, it was partly both.
Yeah, it was. I would say both.
He was a little bit of a kook.
Yeah.
He was raised a kind of a fundamentalist Christian, and he discovered that the people out in Idaho wanted a Second Amendment. He became a Second Amendment nut. We have to have guns. And he hated the government. The word government we hated. So he was like, I'm going to go to Oklahoma, put up a bomb, and kill 130 million innocent people.
Some of the reasons
130
he said he did that was when he was in Terre Haute in prison was Waco.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, I think it fell 1 year after.
Yeah, well, he had religious motives.
And then also Randy Weaver up in Idaho.
Yeah, but he was just an uninformed, ignorant racist.
Right. We need to take a station break. Right.
Okay, well, we have to stop here. We're 50% at time. We're discussing why Trump did so well in South Carolina, despite all the objections of the pundits and the more established Democrats and Republicans who thought he was a barbarian. But I would like to, I'm going to continue, and then I'm going to let my colleague here, Dave Dewitt, have a word here. Do you want to say something more about the Trump campaign, pluses and minuses?
I think that for a long time, the mainstream media and establishment folk just thought of Donald Trump as a joke that might pass.
Right.
I think that they're beginning to realize that that's not the case.
Right.
I think that they're beginning to see that he actually does have a shot toward winning at least the popular vote for the nomination.
Well, he's definitely ahead in the popular vote.
Yeah. And I think that scares
the votes
them.
haven't been counted, but all the pundits say he's going to take the caucus in Nevada hands down. These two Cubans are not going to have any base in Nevada.
I would not be surprised if he continues to win most of the states. I think he's leading in most of the states in the polls.
Robert, I want to ask you about talk that went on last week about a brokered convention. The Republicans might have a brokered convention. Can you explain that to the TV audience?
Okay. It means that Trump has not quite 50% of the delegates. Let's say it's something like 1,900 or something like that. Mm-hmm. Well, I have the exact figures. I don't have those here. But let's say he has a 900 delegates. That's not enough. So Kasich and Carson and even Bush and the two Cubans, Cruz and Rubio, have enough delegates to block it. And then you have the superdelegates. Now that's the unknown thing.
And superdelegates are unpledged delegates.
Yeah, but
so they're not beholden to the vote. They can vote however they like.
Yeah, but the two senators from South Carolina are going to go Republican, and they have 5 representatives. They're all going to go to block Trump, we'll say.
Yeah. The party establishment will rally behind the establishment candidate, most likely Rubio.
It's the delegates who decide.
Right.
And that's the way it was decided back in the 1920s. And Franklin Roosevelt in 1932
through most of American history, actually, all the way up until, when was the first real convention? 68?
Well, wait a minute now. We're talking about the primary.
Right.
The primary was a reform movement started in 1912. In New Hampshire.
Roosevelt, right.
No, in 1912, before Teddy Roosevelt, okay. So there were 12 states that ran primaries from 1912 to 1968. Mm-hmm. Now, when I was interested in politics in 1968, in Ohio, Lyndon Johnson was the president, and we did not have a primary in Ohio. It was a locked convention because Steve Young was the senator from Ohio, and Johnson had all of the Ohio delegates locked up in Steve Young. Well, McGovern was the idea, who said, we're going to have to reform the primary system, and we just don't need 12 states that have a primary. Every state should have the right to have a primary.
And so by 72, that was the case?
Well, McGovern set up the new rules.
While he was a U.S. Senator.
While he was a U.S. Senator. Now, the rules were such a way that McGovern got the nomination.
Yeah. In 72, right.
Because they ran a primary in every Democratic state.
Yeah.
So there was a primary in Ohio in 72.
Right.
And it was separated in congressional districts. So there were 5 delegates from the 10th congressional district, you see. So there were 7 candidates, Wallace and Humphrey and McGovern. Muskie, all of these people were vying for delegates. So it was much more competitive.
Right.
And the voters had a feeling, well, we're getting into it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And actually, I'll just point out one of the best pieces of campaign journalism ever written was written by Hunter S. Thompson.
Right.
And the campaign trail, it's called Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 72. For any of you political junkies or journalists out there, it's must read.
I never read it.
It's great.
Well, David, is that where that movie comes from? I think that Bill Murray plays Hunter S. Thompson.
That's
Buffalo Roam.
That's where the Buffalo Roam. It doesn't come from that book exactly. It comes from a variety of Hunter Thompson's writings.
That's a very entertaining movie.
It's a fun movie.
Now, the most difficult convention of all time was in 1924. It took 102 ballots to nominate
Al Smith?
No, Davis. John W. Davis.
John W. Davis, right. Al Smith was 1920.
Because in those days, the South put up a rule. You got to have a 2/3 vote. Because they wanted that Southern bloc. So they couldn't get they had to go through and through. 102 ballots. So finally they came up with West Virginia, who was a kind of a Southerner at heart. John W. Davis will be the nominee, but then he got
smacked.
Yeah, that's the all-time block of a broken convention. Well, anyway, Roosevelt got it with 3 ballots because he made a deal with the California delegation and the Texas delegation to throw their delegates to him and knock out Ohio and Indiana and the other states, you see. That's how he got the nominee. But it took 3. It took bargaining, see, because your promise, Earl Warren, governor of California, was promised by Eisenhower. Well, you'll become Supreme Court Justice if you throw the California votes. That was all done by Thomas E. Dewey, who was an old-fashioned bargainer.
Now we're talking 48.
Yeah, 48.
Yeah.
So
and Warren was the Chief Justice.
He got the thing. That's right. And then Dewey got Eisenhower nominated.
Yeah, in 52.
In 52, right. Even though Dewey lost his own presidency. He was an insider. Well, anyway, I want to talk about the good side of Donald Trump that's being hidden. He's not the dumbbell that he appears.
No, he's not stupid.
He's
far from stupid.
He has a BA in business school, 1968, from the University of Pennsylvania.
He went to the Wharton.
With the Wharton School. That's the 3rd best school. Now, his argument is that I, as a businessman, know how to bargain just as good as any diplomat. And I'm going to do a better job than the Secretary of State's under the Democrats and Republicans that we have had ever since, we'll say since, he doesn't say he's going to do better than Henry Kissinger. He doesn't want to mention Henry Kissinger. But Henry Kissinger, knowing the European balance of power, knew how to bargain. And he got Nixon elected, but he sold out the Saigon government in doing it. That was a tricky diplomacy. Well, Trump thinks he can do it as a bargainer. And he can bargain with China, and he has no fear of China. And then he says he's against the the Trans-Pacific Partnership, fast track. And he said NAFTA was a disaster. And the United States and Japan and Australia and New Zealand, they should all stop this free trade because the United States should start erecting tariffs, and we should let Japan pay its own way. We should let South Korea pay its own way. They can stand on it. So in a sense, it's back to Taft and isolationism. You could charge him as an isolationist. I think that's a fair criticism.
Trump?
Trump.
Economically,
Yeah.
not militarily. I don't think.
I don't know what he's going to do militarily. It's
really hard to say.
He talks.
He won't give any specifics.
Well,
he talks very tough, though. He
talks
hawkish.
Talks tough. He talks tough.
He doesn't give specifics. He just says he'll have the best people on it.
He'll have the best people. Well, I think he knows enough about how the CIA and the Defense Department really works. And the problem is that the veterans who have been through the Iraq War, who are brain damaged and lost legs and arms and so forth, they don't want another 30-year war in the Middle East.
No.
So the Republican hawks are talking big bravado.
They are.
Yeah.
Here's just a funny aside to that, though.
Right.
With all their big talk, have you noticed how all the journalists they'll always ask how Bernie's going to pay for free college, but they never ask the Republicans how they're going to pay for endless war?
That's right. You got it. You got it. That's the hypocrisy. You got it. Yeah, both of us are Democrats. I'm voting for Sanders, no doubt about it.
Me too.
Right. But we have a difficult road ahead in the super primary.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Sanders has a mountain to climb to get that nomination.
Anyway, Trump has $4.5 billion in the bank, and he's saying he's going to get those corporations, those multinational corporations, to bring the investments out of China and bring them back to the United States and put America, it's going to be great again.
Yeah.
But his idea of greatness, of course, is somewhat like a continental fortress, okay? Anyway, he says that China has been overrated as a threat. And here is the New York Times. The Chinese arsenal is drained.
Oh, we're talking about Chinese military or their
No, we're talking about their economy.
Okay.
Their stocks are going down.
Yes, their economy has been in regression for months now.
Yeah, well, in a sense, they're reading the elections. They're reading what Trump is going to do. So,
you think that's making their brokers nervous? And
I think a lot of
there's a lot of uncertainty, so everybody's tightening up.
Not everybody, but General Motors and General Electric and Boeing Aircraft are saying, well, the Chinese economy is tanking. They can't build any more houses. The banks have to foreclose. So the Chinese stocks are going down in value. And that's due to oil prices.
Which are going down. So I think that Trump I think that Trump reads the New York Times. He's not that dumb. No, he's not dumb. People shouldn't think that he's dumb. He's
that's
not
what
dumb.
the pundits think.
Yeah.
He's a racist. Well,
he might be racist, but he's not dumb.
He talks racism.
He talks racist, but that's propaganda.
That's propaganda. But he says, I have Chinese in my account. I hire Chinese. I hire blacks on my terms. I'm just not going to let them run the State Department. That's what he's saying. He says, I'm going to be in charge. So anyway, the Chinese bank reserves are down 1/5 from their all-time high. And Nixon lost in Vietnam. I'm sure that he knows that. And when he says, let's make America great again, the implication is that America is in decay.
Yes.
There are few pundits and few Democrats who want to admit that. That's the problem.
Do you think that America's in decay?
Well, certainly. Well, let's talk about it. The military is stronger than ever.
The military-industrial complex is
but the economy
a bigger
with that
problem
debt,
than ever.
without that,
The deep state is as big a problem as it's ever been.
With the economy Federal Reserve Bank is on a 3-month leash. $19 trillion debt.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
remember 5 to 6 trillion of that is owed to the American people in the form of the Social Security Trust Fund.
Yeah, okay.
That they started, Greenspan and Reagan started robbing in the 80s, and we've been robbing ever since.
Yeah, but in any case, the United States is competitive with the European economy. And Europe and China and Japan and England are financially still sovereign.
I'm going to have to stop you at that point, Robert. We're going to need to move on to Nevada.
Yeah, that's right. We'll have to leave the South Carolinian campaign in limbo, but in any case, Trump won, and Rubio and Cruz are fighting for the number 2 and 3 position in these 11 states. Turning now to Nevada, we had on the 20th of February the caucus results. Hillary and Vermont Sanders had a very close race. Hillary won it, 52.6% of the vote, and Sanders came close with 47% of the vote. There were only 5,694 votes for Hillary and 5,114 votes for Sanders, and they each got 51 delegates. But the super delegates are not counted. They hold them back.
Yeah.
So
and
if we
Hillary
have a broken
doubtlessly got more super delegates.
Yeah, she will triumph if they go to the convention. Anyway, the problem with the Nevada caucus is that both Hillary and Sanders were pandering to the Mexican vote. And that's going to be held against them in the general election.
In what way do you think they were pandering?
Well, they put on a special show. Did you
Because
see that show with the,
Because they did the debate on Univision, the town hall?
did you see
The
that?
MSNBC Univision?
Did you see
Town
that
hall?
Trimundo, the third world?
Mondo.
Telemundo. Yeah.
Telemundo. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, they both were saying to any Mexican who had any complaint, oh, I have a husband who was in the army and I'm over here in Mexico. Can you bring me back? Yes, we'll bring you back. And then someone else gets up there, what are you going to do about the kids coming from Central America? Oh, we're going to forgive that.
Yeah.
So that's what I call
They both had a history of supporting comprehensive immigration
fine, but
reform
the
and the
immigration
DREAM
bill
Act.
is going to be debated.
Sure, yeah.
It's not a sure thing.
But I don't think they were being disingenuous. I mean, they both support a path to citizenship. Do you think they were being disingenuous?
No, I'm not saying they're lying to the voters.
Okay.
But if I'm a white living in Ohio,
Well,
why
yeah.
do I need more Central Americans and Mexican Americans
Why-
and refugees from Siberia?
I understand
How
that
many refugees are going to come in from the Middle East?
I understand that it might turn some people off, but that's what I was referring to earlier when I was calling Donald Trump a coward. They were being courageous by talking about those things openly. In my opinion.
Courageous in whose test of courage? What makes something courageous?
In my point of view, for a politician who knows that you're going to pay a political price with the people that you're talking about, uneducated whites in Middle America, by being honest about your opinion on immigration reform, that to me is a form of courage.
Now,
Even though you
say
know-
that a little slower.
Even though you know that you're going to pay a political price with uneducated white people in Middle America, to still be forthright and honest about your position on immigration reform and your support for a path to citizenship,
All right.
I consider that a form of courage.
All right, well, we have several kinds of dishonesty. There is Latino dishonesty. There is Jewish dishonesty. There's Muslim dishonesty, there's Protestant dishonesty, and there's Catholic dishonesty. Everybody is a hypocrite. Do you think that the Jewish group in the United States want more Muslims to come to this country?
Well,
What do they say behind the scenes? No, we don't want any more Muslims here.
It doesn't make a difference to me whether they do or not. I think that
Well, who's courageous?
I think the politicians who honestly share their point of view, despite whatever political cost it might have for them with whatever constituency, I think that that's courageous. I think to pander and to lie and to be dishonest about your view because you want to impress some other constituency, that to me is not courageous. That's cowardly.
I still haven't got the
It might not be smart.
I haven't got the interest of the American voter. Why should I vote for more Mexicans and more drugs to come to the United States? I'm a white living in Ohio. Do I hate myself?
Well,
Is that being courageous?
It's being ungenerous.
Yeah, look at what Clinton and Sanders have done from a political view, Robert.
Okay, what are you saying?
You're saying it's political suicide to pander to that.
No, I'm not saying it's suicide.
Well, I mean, David's saying that, you could lose votes.
I just don't know what the word courage means.
Oh, okay. Well, he said they had the courage in order to speak to those people and, offer their help to those people, whereas some white guy and redneck in Ohio might think, well, there's a good reason.
No, what hypocrisy means is.
No, I didn't say hypocrisy.
Do you think?
You're talking about courage.
Or what is courage in your opinion? Tell me who is courage.
Well, I won't say it was courage to, as David said, but what I would say is that, it might be a political liability on down the line.
Of course it will be a political liability, and that's what's courageous about it to me. Or it's not. It's a form of courage to me to be honest, even when you know that you're going to pay a political price.
According to whose definition of honesty?
According to their records and what do you mean? Do you think I asked if
Okay,
you thought
I'll go over it again. I'll go over it again.
You don't think they were
There's a
disingenuous?
Jewish religion. There is a Catholic religion and there's a Protestant religion. There is a Democratic program and there's a Republican. You have 5 interest groups. Now, who's courageous in whose eyes?
I'm not sure what you mean about the religion.
Do you understand that the Mexicans have a different interest than whites in Ohio?
We all know what David has said. That's all part of the equation. But, perhaps you should define courage in a political sense.
I think I can.
Okay.
I think it was courageous for Lyndon Johnson to say to the Democratic South, for moral reasons, we should support Martin Luther King and we should pass a civil rights bill despite the interests of Texas. And his southern colleagues from Georgia, Senator Russell, yes, you have done that, but you have ruined the Democratic Party in the South. And he has. So it was political courage for Johnson to have protected Martin Luther King and the blacks. And he did it. And he'll go down in history in the eyes of the blacks as a hero.
Would it not be similarly courageous for a Democratic politician now to say that we need to say to the white middle America that you're talking about, we need to pass comprehensive immigration reform?
Or what does
Would that not be the same
What
thing?
does comprehensive immigration reform?
A path to citizenship.
Okay, let me give you some statistics because you're living in a kind of a dream world.
I don't think a path to citizenship is living in a dream world.
Let me give you some statistics.
I think a path to citizenship
Let me give you some statistics.
Only reasonable. I think what Donald Trump is proposing, preying on people's fears, saying that he's going to deport 12 million American, even if they are illegal immigrants living in America, that he's going to bust down doors and send police into people's homes to drag them across the border.
Now, let me get
I'd much rather support a path to citizenship. And I think that there's a direct parallel with Lyndon Johnson taking on the Dixiecrats in the South over civil rights, to Democrats today taking on anti-immigration reform people in favor of comprehensive immigration.
I agree with that. It sounds like there's a parallel there.
I think it's exactly parallel.
Let me give you these statistics very quickly. In 1948, when I graduated from high school, economists had a huge graph. It went like that. 134 million people in the United States. It's now up to 330. Europe, meanwhile, is 750 million. Africa is 1 billion. China is 1.7 billion.
We have 2 minutes left in the program.
Are you telling me that the United States should commit suicide and allow every immigrant who wants to come?
No, absolutely
Or what are you
not.
saying now?
I'm saying that we should not be dragging 12 million people, busting down their doors with the police,
All right,
and
that's
dragging them
12
out of their
million.
homes. We should give them a path to citizenship.
Why
And we
12?
should
Why
enforce
stop
the
at 12?
immigration laws that we already have on the books.
Okay, we had the
I
Missouri.
understand the overpopulation problem.
You understand that?
Yes.
Who's enforcing the present immigration laws? The Republicans allow Mexicans to come in for cheap labor. The Democrats bring Mexicans in because they're going to get more votes. They're both hypocrites. I have no obligation to commit suicide.
I don't consider reasonable immigration reform
What is
suicide.
reasonable?
Well, that's stuff that has to be
Are we
hammered out.
stopping at
But
12 million?
I've already said a path
How
to
about 15
citizenship
million? How about 20 million?
and enforcing
How about all the people from the
borders
Mexican?
that we have now.
There's 110 million Mexicans. You're going to bring all 110 million?
No, that's absurd.
Oh, that's
Nobody's
well.
saying
You're
that.
going to stop at some point.
Nobody's
Blow
saying
your
that.
voice, Robert. You're going to blow the.
Okay, you're going to stop at one point.
I'm saying that the 12 million immigrants here now deserve a path to citizenship.
That's your opinion.
I'm not saying that we need to have 190 million Mexicans
You
come
have an
across the
opinion.
border.
You're right to your opinion.
Thank you.
But I said to a Jewish friend of mine, I said, it looks like the Protestants and the Jews and the Catholics are all committing suicide, but they're doing it for different reasons, and they're doing it at a different rate.
I don't
Now, I
understand
don't know
the
what
religious
scale
part of
you
this.
don't understand that.
No, the religious
Well, I think
thing
I've
don't
touched
get.
on it.
Well, Robert, you're lucky that that wasn't an issue in your 1972 campaign for Congress, right?
Well, the issue in 1972 was what are you going to do about guns?
It's a good thing you got that solved back then.
I
We have
didn't-
to wrap it up.
I didn't have that.
Let's wrap it up.
No, I think that the comprehensive immigration bill we have is not comprehensive. The bill is called Sanders-McCain bill.
Okay.
And I'm sorry
I
for
support it, you don't.
you support it. I think it's not suicide, but it's hypocrisy and it's not courage to
Okay.
support.
We've got about 15 seconds left.
Okay, I think that Democrats and Republicans in Nevada have brought up the Mexican issue, and that's different than the Cuban issue and the ethnic issue of Muslims and Jews, and we're going to have many wars ahead of us if you're going to solve the immigration bill, and that's going to satisfy everybody. You can't satisfy everybody.
You never can in politics. Thank
Okay.
you for having me, Professor.
Okay. Good luck to you.